That's a tough situation. If there's one location that best defines Tim Cook's legacy so far as CEO of Apple, it's China. And the threat of tariffs presents a new kind of test. Now, Cook's work in China on the supply chain side is a big part of what got him the CEO job. And since he became CEO, he's transformed Apple's business in China from a Wild West, or East, I guess, of knockoff products and unauthorized stores into a top-tier market for Apple's products. In fiscal 2017, Apple booked $45 billion in sales in Greater China, which was roughly 20% of its total global revenue. That's up from $12.5 billion and 11% of global revenue when Tim Cook took over the CEO job just 7 years ago. Apple now lists 41 retail stores in mainland China, 6 more in Hong Kong. So, what happens if this trade war between the U.S. and China continues to escalate? Now, potentially, price increases in the U.S. and red tape in China. Apple wrote in a letter last week that tariffs would hit the Apple Watch, AirPods, Apple Pencil, HomePod, Mac Mini, and various adapters and chargers. The iPhone itself doesn't look to be affected so far, at least in the United States. The Chinese government could make it harder to buy in China. On the one hand, there's no company better positioned to weather this kind of storm than Apple. It has a $1 trillion market cap, $250 billion cash hoard, huge profit margins, and a loyal customer base. But on the other, Apple's arguably the most high-profile company in the world, and it got that way by bridging the U.S. and China like no other company has. It could be a convenient punching bag. Either side wants to make a point, and both sides seem to want to make a point, Becky.
John, how come the iPhone wouldn't be impacted?
Well, I think it has to do with the Trump administration assuring Apple that the phone itself wouldn't be affected, but I mean, all these things are fluid. I guess it could change.
Right, and I guess this just gets to the point. We've seen that we've already talked about the same issue for Ford earlier this morning and what that might mean, where the company said, forget it, we're not going to make the cars here because there's not enough of a market here. If you get to the point where all manufacturing is local, Chinese phones are manufactured in China, phones in the United States or whatever else is manufactured here. I mean, you're not talking about something you can flip a switch and do this overnight. This is a long-term change in process. Apple
has this image of crafting things so precisely. We sometimes forget they're making tens of millions of these per quarter, and it has to be exacting. They have to do this in a very tight way. Right now, there's some human labor associated with that. These are not high-paying jobs. The system's set up over there. To move it someplace else would be an extraordinary amount of work. We saw them set up some manufacturing in India for the lower-end iPhone SE. Bringing it over here, I mean,
even if these tariffs went into place, I can't imagine that happening, at least not right away.
It would take years. The engineering lift is very huge because they'd have to use a lot more robotics. Tim Cook has talked at some length about what that would take. We don't have the engineering chops here in the U.S. to set up a factory that way.
Just to say, they would need a lot more robotics, meaning that they would not be creating necessarily as many jobs as you're thinking. These are not assembly line jobs that are going to happen here.
No, every time these companies, whether it is Foxconn or other contract manufacturers trying to move manufacturing here, it's much more heavily automated than it would be elsewhere. You've got a fraction of the jobs for people.